New concepts and ideas to help you reach your full potential. Reach your full potential. Reach your full potential. Small win, small win, small win. Keep your momentum going.
The Success 101 Podcast.
Welcome to the Success 101 Podcast. This is your host, Jared Warren, and each episode, my goal is to bring you a new concept or idea to help you maximize your full potential. Thanks for joining me here today. Now let's kick things off. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Success 101 Podcast. So excited to have Dayne Barkley back on the show with us today. What's going on, man?
Hey, Jared. Thanks for having me back on. I really appreciate it. Looking forward to diving into this.
So we talked last time a little bit about your morning smoothie. We talked about, obviously, the morning routine and water and HRV monitor and grounding and got into so many things. I never thought I would be this guy, but I think I actually prefer talking a little bit about the evening routine more than the morning, not because it's any less important or more important. They're both so important, but I think I struggled with sleep for so long, not sleep, but just staying in the bed long enough and felt horrible all the time. Felt like I had to get up and go, that I really didn't understand what an evening routine looked like. I would just burn it until I really just felt like I had to force myself to go to bed, sleep a little bit, if you even want to call it that, because it probably wasn't restful, wasn't tracking it, of course. And then I'd jump up and get on about my day and wonder why I felt so bad all the time, which sounds crazy, but if you're in that world, it seems normal, that you would just keep doing what you have to do to keep going, almost like a sacrifice. And I came at it, many people come at it from a position of strength when really it's weakness, but 90% or more possibly of an awesome morning actually starts in the PM. So I'm excited for you to take us through that today. Talk about what you start doing even at the end of the day when you close down work, on into the night, on into the evening. So thanks so much for sharing. Why don't you kick it off with how you structure your evening routine? And like I said, I'd like for you to take it actually from the point when you stop work, shut down your work, and let's roll from there.
Yeah, as you mentioned, it's incredibly common, I guess, these days for people to have sleep problems. It's actually 2018's trending to be one of the top health trends, which is sleep and I guess sleep issues. So around that, as you mentioned, PM and AM morning routines and evening routines are just vital to sort of cap your days at least. An area I don't know if I touched on in the morning routines was how important these routines and habits are. This collection of habits, because of the fact that in the middle of your day, you might not have total control over how your actual day goes. Whereas that your morning and your evening routines, you got control of that, and you can sort of start and end your days, and that really impacts your actual waking hours as well. So I guess I'm still struggling myself, to be honest, with the evening routines. The morning routines I focused a lot of time on, and I got it sort of down pat now for myself personally. Evening routines I find quite difficult in the fact that it's very hard to discern where the trigger point is where you start that evening routine. How I found with morning routines, it was quite simple for me, the fact that the trigger is just waking up. So waking up in the morning, that's the trigger. The routine is the small amount of habits collected, and then the reward is usually my smoothie I make for myself. So that's a whole sort of how they trigger the routine. Whereas evening routines tend to sort of blur until you just pass out and then you're gone. And so that makes it difficult to sort of, I guess, get a structure down for routine. I've actually, at the moment, I'm actually tracking daytime, nighttime variables and fixed variables, a real typical biohacker, to see what areas may impact my sleep quality. With my sleep data I have in my Oura Ring. So I've been at it for the last 2 weeks now. I'm tracking different variables and see any correlations that may actually impact my sleep. So that's what I'm actually doing at the moment, to see any sort of bits and pieces, because for me, it's still quite difficult to discern what actually is impacting my sleep and what I can do to optimize the most out of it so I can get the best quality sleep, so I can have the best waking hours.
Man, that's really interesting. I've never thought about it that way. I know for me, and everybody, we said this on the first episode, everybody's affected a little bit differently by how things, triggers, environment, anything around you can really affect you. But I've never thought about the fact that some people like yourself, like you just mentioned, might actually have a harder time with the evening routine simply because there's really no start time to that. I know for me, it's actually the reverse of that. In the morning, it's a little harder for me because when I do wake up, that means it's time to go. And many times in the past, especially not so much now, but I would miss out on meditation. I would miss out on reading. That's why Hal Elrod's book, The Miracle Morning, as we talked about last time, was so big for me, because it gave me a blueprint of how to like really do things, even if it was for a short amount of time. But to me, the hard part was getting up, the trigger of waking up and going, okay, I need to go. I don't have time to do some of these things because I have to just get in the day and start crushing it. The evening time was easier for me once I started picking up a morning and evening routine, because I started focusing my sights on trying to work at it once I got home. So that's very interesting. Thanks so much for sharing that. Let's camp out for just a second. Let's take a step back. We talked a little bit about the Oura Ring last time. You just mentioned tracking. You're currently tracking some other things with the Oura Ring. For those out there who don't know what the Oura Ring is tracking, go into that and tell us specifically how you're using the specific measurements that it tracks to help, upgrade to peak performance.
Yeah, I mean, the Oura Ring is something I'm hugely obsessed with. Anybody who knows me knows how much I love the data from that. I truly believe it's the best wearable and sleep tracker there is in the market, and it's showing itself in the way people are, especially the biohacking community, is embracing it. And the popularity is growing from that.
And by the way, not to cut you off here, but do you remember when probably 2.5 months ago, I shot you an instant message or Facebook message or something, and I just said, hey, I'm seeing so much on the Oura Ring. So many people I respect love it. You obviously love it. You talk about it all the time, but it's pretty steep on the price. Is it really worth it? And you shot back a response that pretty much sold me on it. I don't remember how you worded it, but I was like, yeah, when they come out with this new version I keep hearing about, I've got to get it. But you were like, oh, no doubt. It's totally worth the money with all the stuff that it tracks. Do you remember me shooting that message your way?
Yeah, I do. A lot of people have asked me whether it's worth it. I said it's the best thing since sliced bread, in my opinion. Even though I don't eat bread, if I was to eat bread, it's definitely right up there. So yeah, with the Oura Ring, I particularly focus around the deep sleep and the REM sleep, which most people, I guess, that's generally where the majority of the deep restorative sleep and the REM sleep is where you dream as well. So and also figuring out the awake times and the light sleep times. So it breaks down your sleep sort of architecture, and also there's a lot more metrics as well, the resting heart rate as well. So you know what's going on with your heart and your environment as well. So at the moment for myself personally, I'm trying to focus on see if I can optimize my deep sleep and my REM sleep, which I've seen quite a common occurrence among a lot of Oura Ring users is getting very little deep sleep and trying to find ways to optimize that. It's still a very confusing area of sort of science that people are still discovering. And as humans, we don't really know yet what the full intention is of full deep sleep and REM sleep and why they fluctuate per person and per age group and per sort of demographic. Everything sort of, it varies. If you're in deep recovery, your deep sleep would be a lot higher. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's a good thing. It just means you're recovering, your body's trying to recover. And if it's super low, it sometimes means you miss out on some of that deep restorative sleep. And what I've noticed myself personally is that when I do have the high amount of deep sleep, I do wake up feeling a lot more refreshed. And so I've tried to sort of find ways to keep that at a decent level. And so I'm constantly sort of waking up trying to feel refreshed. So there's certain variables that I've implemented that I believe that definitely have an impact on getting my body or allowing my body to fall into a deep restful sleep. And I can talk about them now, actually.
Press pause on that for one moment, if you don't mind here. People can study sleep cycles. People can understand what goes on in the brain and in the body when you sleep and you start going through these different sleep cycles. People can study that, right? And people can understand it, but it doesn't mean that they can actually do that. Just because they understand it doesn't mean that they're going to lay down that night and that's what's going to happen, right? I mean, you have to work at this and you have to actually put your body in a position to get into those sleep states. So if you don't mind, let's take a step back before we dive into the different sleep states or even what you're tracking with the Oura. What have you worked on? I know you said it's a little bit more of a struggle than the morning, but what have you started working on? What have you been implementing that has allowed you to even get into a position where you could track the sleep and manipulate it in a way that would be helpful for you?
Yeah, so I think I started from, it must have been dinner, I'm pretty sure. So my nighttime variables, one thing that I actually did change quite significantly in the recent months, was having dinner earlier. So there's one thing I was noticing, having dinner later was impacting on my resting heart rate. So my resting heart rate was happening later in the night. And so I wasn't able to get into a deep restful sleep because my body was still digesting the food that was in my stomach. So I guess that's, in a way, it's where my nighttime routine begins. Having a dinner relatively early and then not eating, obviously until next morning, which is usually maybe about a 14, 16 hour fast in a sense, which is fantastic for the body to be in while you're sleeping. So it's not trying to digest food. It allows your mind and your body actually to fall into a deep sleep the way it naturally should be. So
yeah, and you're not even drinking any caffeine. So imagine people that are hammering caffeine all the time, they're going to be in that state for even longer.
I can't imagine, man. The amount, it's ridiculous. The eating super late and even chugging caffeine after midday. I don't know how on earth they actually sleep. It'd be quite interesting to see their data, I guess, with an Oura Ring. But to have caffeine, I do everything I can to sort of optimize my sleep as much as possible. And caffeine, as most people are aware, I guess it blocks the adenosine receptors in your brain. So it sort of doesn't give you that sleepiness that you get from it. So if you're consistently consuming it, you'll never get that sort of tired feeling. So if you're having a coffee at 6 o'clock at night, you can fall asleep. Doesn't mean you're going to have a restful sleep though. So that's something, caffeine, if you do want to drink it, consistently drinking it, just have an idea to cap it about midday. And even if they want to just continually drink coffee, decaf, just quite easily switch to get decaf in the afternoon, and you can still, and that won't affect your sleep. So if you really want to have coffee, and even if you eventually want to do what I did, and I guess go off coffee, or caffeine at least, then you can quite easily just switch to decaf and then go back and forth. And eventually you probably notice yourself sleeping better. And like myself, in a way, how a lot of people are addicted to substances out there to get themselves that little buzz. I'm addicted to wellness, and the feeling I get from this, I want more and more of it. So in a sense, I am addicted to something. In this case, it's just feeling good and really good constantly. So
you mentioned having dinner a little bit earlier, resting heart rate, going down some, not taking in any of the caffeine. What are you doing after dinner? Take us through little by little, whether it's supplements, whether it's routines and rituals, meditation, whatever in the world you're doing to start really winding down. Because I would think if you're doing dinner a little bit earlier, that has a tendency for your body to still be up a little bit and not really ready to go to bed yet. What is your next step that you're putting in there?
Usually around dinner time. So for the time being in Melbourne, Australia here, sunsets around 8:30. So this light cycles do play an enormous impact on your sleep sort of length and also sleep timing. So at the moment in summertime here, it's longer light cycles. So it means naturally we're going to have less sort of sleeping hours. The body's going to gravitate more towards that. So my dinner's usually around 6:30 or so around there. I try to keep it sort of early as possible. And then I usually go into I usually just relax. I don't do much focus work. So I don't tend to do any sort of work on my laptop or anything. I tend to just the great thing, obviously, before bed would be reading fiction. Nothing that involves too much of the mind thinking in sort of complex ways. Just sort of anything can sort of switch it off. So whether that's just scrolling through, whether replying to some messages, and then just in a way sort of slowly dwindling down to I get either a sleep tea as well. So if it's in the cooler months, it's a lot easier to drink like a sleep tea. I usually have my one that I'm trying quite regularly is obviously a reishi tea, and then also another tea that's a mix between a sort of valerian root, licorice root, and like I guess chamomile and lavender. They're very popular sort of sedative herbs and some flowers that tend to sort of knock you out in a sense. So I find that calms me down and sort of gets me into a tired state.
Does valerian root have the effect on you that it does on many people that I know, where it really makes you groggy in the morning? Maybe not, since you're using it quite a bit, but does valerian root give you that groggy feeling in the morning, or are you okay with it the way your body processes it?
I have heard that. Yeah, I know a lot of people I've seen and heard from that do have some negative effects from the valerian root. For me personally, it's not a big deal. I haven't noticed it at least. So again, everyone's so individual. So in terms of what actual works for you, mightn't work for me, and vice versa. So it's just experimenting. So the whole thing, if you're aware that it makes you groggy, then simply just don't have it, which is great. And having that awareness is a huge step ahead of above the rest. So just being aware of what actually makes you feel good and feel tired. So that's hence why I'm actually tracking a lot of my variables at the time being, to actually see objective data of what is actually impacting, and then also subjectively how I feel as well.
I know it changes, right? So this is an impossible question, but out of a 7-day week that you're tracking, how often will you do a tea at night or just something after dinner to help wind down?
For the time being, actually every day, about 5 or 6 days of the year.
Okay, so it's a pretty normal habit for you. I mean, it's a pretty normal part of your routine, I should say.
Yeah, and I tend to sort of keep it to, this is an organic sleep tea I have here that I bought locally. There's a reishi tea, And there's also a Tulsi or holy basil tea, which is popular in the Ayurvedic sort of community. So I usually stick to those ones. They're quite calming. And I usually, if it's summertime, I will make a cold brew. So I brew it, put it in the fridge, and I can consume that at night, and it's nice, refreshing. And then if it's this winter time, I make a warm one. So yeah, I find that's it's almost become part of my routine now in a way. It's a way to calm me down, but also to give me a little bit extra edge to sort of enhance my sleep quality.
And I know people are going to ask, what brand are you trusting and going to from that? Because that's the biggest question I get when people mention certain things on the podcast is what brand are they using?
Oh yeah, big time. Reishi tea, I do like the Four Sigmatic Reishi tea. It's very easy to rip and pour into it and mix it up. It's quite good, as well as the Real Mushrooms Reishi. I'm a big fan of all the Real Mushrooms line of supplements.
So the Real Mushrooms, we talked about that in our first episode. That's a super trusted brand. I love those guys and what they're putting out over there. And a lot of people you and I follow trust them or people we're connected to.
Yeah, absolutely. It may not taste the best thing ever. I guess a lot of people that are there to optimize, like myself and biohackers, would just chug anything down. It's good for you, regardless of the taste. And you get used to it anyway. Once you go off sugar and all these sort of things, you just get used to the taste and you get sort of addicted to the wellness, as I said before.
And you're doing that hot and cold, as you mentioned. So we're getting on into the evening here. You've had an early dinner. What time typically, I know it varies, but what time typically are you trying to get to bed as you're setting up this evening routine?
So I'm looking at my sleep data at the moment. And for the last week, it's around about 10, on average, 10:15. It sort of varies per day, but I keep it, sleep timing is a huge variable to sort of get right, is to try to keep it as consistent as possible every day of the week. So even weekends, having an Oura Ring will actually give you accurate data, whereas most people think if they go to hop in bed at 10 o'clock and wake up at 7, that they've got 9 hours of sleep, which is not true, because you wake up and how long it takes you for to sleep latency and all as well. So it's quite a confusing sort of subject to get into.
Yeah. Are you doing any GABA supplements and magnesium? I know you actually mentioned in our first episode, you're doing magnesium L-threonate in the morning, whereas most people are doing that in the evening, myself included. You said it helps with your circadian rhythms to do that in the morning. Are you doing any GABA, any melatonin?
Yeah, I do. I also take some magnesium L-threonate at night as well. Magnesium is great for, I guess, morning and night is a great time to do it. I take a little bit at night, but the majority of it's in the morning. A little bit at night just to sort of calm the nervous system as well. But I also, I've been experimenting with 5-HTP, which is a precursor of melatonin. I'm not a huge fan of melatonin supplementation. From what I've seen and heard and read and over the years, it's I believe it does have some down regulation of the actual endogenous production of melatonin. So if you just rely on melatonin supplementation, your body no longer has to sort of produce the amount of melatonin, so therefore I don't believe it's an effective solution. For short-term use, I think it could be great to get yourself into a cycle and use it short-term to get yourself into a routine and rhythm. Long-term use, I personally don't recommend, from what I've seen at least. So with all my supplements, I'm constantly cycling periodically with it. So I never take it consistently every day. So weekends, I have no supplementation whatsoever. I let my body sort of rest from that. From morning and evening supplements, I don't touch anything. And then during the weekdays, I just I experiment. So sometimes I might have some 5-HTP. Some nights I have none. And then following nights I might have a bit more, and maybe some L-theanine as well for calming down. So I do constantly optimize and experiment with myself, and I try not to sort of stay consistent with my supplementation, just for the fact that I don't really know it purely how to understand whether it becomes a habit forming or not. So
right. So that kind of gets us up to your bedtime there. Let's go back to the Oura Ring for just a moment that you were talking about before I had us take a step back. So the Oura Ring is going to track a lot of things. And for those listeners out there who have not seen the new version that's going to be coming out, I believe in April, it's on pre-order right now, but it's going to be coming out, I believe in April. There's a readiness score that it has, but then it also has your sleep score, resting heart rate, as you mentioned, activity score, all of those sort of things. And I'm just hearing more and more about how they're really perfecting this science in a ring and how it's stronger using the ring than maybe, Fitbit and some other things that people have become accustomed to using. Have you found any weakness with the Oura Ring?
Only sort of area where it's not, I guess, a starring in terms of wearables would be maybe the fitness side of things to sort of track. It tracks movement and steps, And it's added some new features in its updates where you can add in sort of your training sort of programs you wanted to. You can strength training, you can add in that as well. But I think from what I've seen from the newer version, they're enhancing that again. So like usual, they're going to keep evolving and they're going to become an absolute juggernaut in the industry. And as you mentioned too before, but I might jump in as well, is that the whole Fitbit and all them, I had them in the past. I tried all them, but everything I've learned from the past few years constantly keeps going back to the whole the EMF area, which is a big sort of area of mine. The fact that the ring can go into airplane mode, so it's not emitting any Bluetooth signal onto your finger. So mine is always in airplane mode. So throughout the day, it's just collecting the data on my finger without emitting any Bluetooth radiation into it. Whereas majority of the Apple Watches and Fitbits and all those trendy ones out there, as far as I'm aware, they do emit that and it's directly onto your wrists. So for accuracy, but also from EMF radiation, it's no good.
Yeah. So when do you actually turn it on and collect all the data then? Because it has to connect at some point, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's part of my morning routine. In the morning, I take it off my finger, it resets, syncs the data with the Bluetooth, and it's only for a very short time, so a couple of minutes. I look at my data and I put it straight back into airplane mode. So for battery life as well, it saves it, but also just the fact that I'm not instead of subjecting myself to any Bluetooth radiation, which I know is a huge area of focus of mine too, is just mitigation of VMFs.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what I've heard about the Oura Ring, and guys, this is not a plug for the Oura Ring, or maybe it is if it helps, right? I mean, this podcast is all about peak performance, so maybe it is, but it's not a direct plug. We're not getting any money off the Oura Ring. That's not why we're promoting it here. But from what I've heard, even in the current state, and I think the new version is going to be even better, is that it really shines. It really stands out with its sleep tracking. You can do all kinds of stuff with it now, especially the new version. I think you're going to be able to weight lift and train and run, and it's all comfortable and all of that. Not a watch or a Fitbit or something like that's not, but all of these different strengths and test scores and things like that it has are really going to make it shine, and they're just going to keep getting better and better on the technology. So what have you discovered? Are there any areas of your sleep or night routine that you would say that you weren't great in or you were average in, that you've really been able to improve over a period of time, that you really can see the needle moving, see the difference?
The big one, I guess, has been the last couple of years I've been doing this, but it's an area where it's going to explode into the future next year and onwards. Is blue light blocking is an area where I wasn't particularly knowledgeable in until the last couple of years, and it's something I wear every single night, no matter what. My lighting environment, I'm about 99% compliant with. My food is obviously about 90%. I can still enjoy an ice cream here and there, but my lighting environment is massive, especially towards sleep. So blue light blocking glasses, if people aren't familiar, you can go on Amazon. There's so many different pairs out there these days. Depends on your budget. So if you don't want to spend a lot of money, just getting a pair of these sort of industrial looking ones and trying them out. And that is a huge variable when it comes to sort of sleep quality and getting to the right amount of sleep. If you're even if you want to watch TV late at night, whether it is it doesn't even matter, as long as you're wearing some blue blocking glasses to knock that blue out of it and to sort of let your pineal gland secrete some of that melatonin.
And I know you mentioned in our first episode, you're using more of the True Dark glasses. There's Swannick glasses. There's just your basic $7 welder's glasses online. The True Dark you found, though, to be the best as far as winding down at night, right?
Yeah, in terms of quality, I believe True Dark to be one of the best out there from blocking, and also the frequency of light they block, the blue and green wavelength as well. They're not the most trendy looking glasses, and that is an area that I'm personally working on myself with a company here in Australia and designing the pair that actually can be worn outside, that's interchangeable. So that's something I'm looking at hopefully developing for next year, is a pair of blue blocking glasses that's unlike anything else out there that I've seen at the moment. But yeah, for the time being, if you want to wear a pair at home and comfortably, then True Dark, I guess, one of the best. If you want to wear it out in the streets, Swannies are sort of one of the best that's I wear. And then there's a few other ones. So you have to, at the time being, you have to buy multiple pairs if you want to be wearing them consistently. Whereas I'm trying to sort of squash that from the product I'm developing on.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I've heard is just the True Dark. You really don't want to wear those like out to a dinner or whatever. Like even if you don't care how they look, you still don't want to wear those out because they're going to make you feel tired. Whereas with the Swannies, they are fashionable, but just with the technology of the lens, you can wear those out and they'll still be okay.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. From the dorkier pairs that block out more the wavelengths are just comfortable wearing inside. But when it comes outside, most people aren't even comfortable wearing the Swannies because they're so, I guess, different. But as I'm sort of projecting, the future is going to be people are going to start wearing them because they're going to sort of start to see the benefit is quite extraordinary. Just wearing how light has an impact on their bodies. And how, wearing a pair of Swannies can make such a difference, or even any pair of blue blockers.
Talk to me about temperature. Temperature is a huge thing. Most people who are biohackers talk about temperature, and not only from neurogenesis, but just regeneration of the body. Or is there a certain temperature that you're fighting for every night to try to keep it at?
As cool as possible. At the moment, it's hot, very hot here in Melbourne, quite humid as well. So the nights are quite hard for me to get to sleep. And I'm noticing that on my data as well, the sleep environment. So if it's AC, if it's in wintertime, always having your window cracked open. I believe it's better to have to mimic what it is outside. So if it's throughout winter, it's great to have the window open. Summertime, it can get quite hot. So having a fan on is something just to keep you cool as well. Also having a cool shower, cold shower, ice baths, not too close to bedtime, but enough to sort of shock your body a little bit to get you towards bed. And it's actually something I've been experimenting with for the time being, which is perfect for the summer down here in Melbourne. It's a new product called Primal Cold, and they sent me out a thing called a jetpack, and this is quite funny. This is it's pretty much an ice pack for your balls, and it works the same way as I guess cold thermogenesis does when you have ice baths as well. So this is just a concentrated version, which is a lot more practical. And you can just literally take it out of the freezer and then place it on. It's for guys, obviously. Place it on your balls, and it helps towards testosterone production, but also allows you to cool your body temperature down as well to get into a nice deep sleep. So for those hot summer nights, I've been trying that out as well with some ice packs to sort of get my body cooled down.
Man, I can see a lot of benefit to having cooler temperatures down there on your scrotum, but I don't know about sleeping. That's interesting. I haven't thought about it that way. Does it do anything for having sons? Because I've got 3 daughters. I haven't figured out how to have a son yet, so maybe that's the solution, right?
Experiment. There you go. It could be great anecdotal evidence for you to send through to Primal Cold.
Yeah, that's right. I'll do a report on it if that happens. I'm pushing for one more. Got to get that boy in there. I would love to know, Dayne, we talked in the first episode, this really isn't so much about the night routine, but I was just fascinated to find out that a guy that is as busy and active as you, from everything that I've seen you putting out, from your writing to your Instagram stories to everything that you're doing, there's just so much energy. It seems like that's there. You're always doing so many new things, always a smile on your face, always working out, always trying all these new things and grounding and all that stuff. And you mentioned that you're not doing anything caffeine wise. In our society today, I don't care where you are in the world, we've built a society around the chase. It's the buzz, it's the stimulant, it's the upper, it's the whatever. And then we're trying to massively dose ourselves with stuff at night, whether it's melatonin or whatever, to like kill all that. So it's a yin and the yang in the wrong way. It's like build ourselves way up, stimulate, caffeine, Adderall, you fill in the blank, whatever it is all day long that you're using. And then at night, you're trying to take sleeping medication and you're just wearing yourself out. I'd love for the listeners to know why someone with as much energy as you have, because I know this wasn't always the case for you earlier in life, why someone with as much energy as you have feels like you've really weaned yourself off of that to where you don't have to chase after the stimulants and you can really be what you said in our first episode, you can have so much more energy without having to chase after that. How did you get to that point? And just, I guess, for lack of better words, teach us a lesson on how we can start weaning ourselves off of that where we don't need it and we can be better for it.
Yeah, it's been a pretty long journey for myself. I'm still quite young, but I'm still constantly evolving and sort of learning how I can sort of optimize in every area possible I can. So for me, it was, I guess, having a good solid view of your long-term sort of beliefs or where you want to be. So I have a very long-term view of where I want to be and how healthy I want to be till I die. And so most people tend to want to be just in the now, and they're very impatient and want things now. They want to feel sort of the buzz and hit now, and then just not really have any sort of awareness of where they're going to be in 5, 10, 20 years time. And so for me, I've had sort of the patience is of something I've worked on, and have to realize that it's in the long run of where I want to go to and how I want to be every day, but also in the long run, how I want to feel when I'm with my kids and grandchildren, and how long I can sort of keep healthy and consistently healthy. For me, I've been quite fortunate to have Not a lot of losses, family losses in my life, but the loss of my grandfather triggered something in me that I was enough to sort of looking towards my own health. And then from there, for the last 3 or 4 years, I've just been consistently evolving. And I guess doing those small things accumulate over time. And it's a book, the Darren Hardy's The Compound Effect, which I read.
Oh, great book.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant book is what I read this year. And that was something that just resonated with me, with the whole doing those small things and consistently compounding over time. So for me, it's constantly tweaking certain areas, whether that's sleep, a little bit of diet, movement. If I'm constantly just improving on that, then in 10 years time, I'm going to be an absolute beast. And feeling great along the way as well. But it's always trying to push the needle forward in a sense, and constantly progress, evolve, and adapt with your lifestyle and environment. And for me, it's just become easier and easier as become, I guess, addicted to this wellness and this lifestyle. To begin with, is quite difficult to get started. But the best thing to do is start small, as you mentioned in the intro. It's just small wins, and you can consistently keep in doing that, and then not worrying too much about falling off the bandwagon, but just jumping straight back on it. And there's a great article, actually, I might actually get linking into the show notes, from James Clear. James Clear is a very big sort of habit guide that I follow a lot of his work. And there's a brilliant little short 5 tips that he has for to form sort of habits. And you can link in there and people can read that. And that's pretty much, it's nail on the head with everything I believe in and what I've done myself personally in terms of habit forming and routines and lifestyle changes.
So Dayne, thanks so much. So much value here. As we get ready to wrap up the podcast, I think probably the question listeners are going to have is, we've talked about your routine, night routine, everything from eating earlier to the Oura Ring to supplements to actually what you're doing at night to temperature wise and all of that to finally wind down. I'd love to know, and I think a lot of people out there would love to know, what you're doing about 10 minutes before bed up until the point where you fall asleep. What does that look like? You and I talked about in the first episode about taping your mouth shut at night, talked about wearing earplugs, those sort of things. Walk us through that and what you're doing. Give us a picture of what that looks like, because it sounds crazy. And I said that before I started doing it, but I've slept with earplugs in my ears for about 1.5 years now, and recently started taping my mouth after reading The Oxygen Advantage. So give us kind of a peek into what you're doing right now and what people can learn from your probably 10 minutes before bed up until you fall asleep.
Yeah, sure as hell do. I look crazy when I go to bed at night with the amount of stuff I have on me. I look crazy, but it doesn't matter. For me, it works. And I think it's such an easy variables to sort of add into your lifestyle. So I think with me, I do like to sort of, when I wind things down before I go to bed, I'm a big fan of heart math, inner balance, heart coherence training. I think it's great to sort of have something visual to look at and focus on your breathing. Just a 5-minute session of that. That's a little device you plug into your iPhone or Android, and you can look at it pairs with an app as well and sort of focus on your breathing. So any form of breathing exercise for me is great, whether it's Wim Hof, something that's light and rhythmic in a sense. So I usually focus on some breathing before I go to bed. And then when I tend to unwind, I have a few things I like to do. I like to occasionally, not every night, lie on, I guess, a bed of nails. So Bulletproof have a great sleep induction mat, which is an acupressure point mat. I think you mentioned before in your show.
Yeah, it's great.
That's fantastic. Yeah. So an acupressure mat, which sort of it gets you into a parasympathetic state, which calms you as well. So to lie on to begin with, it's quite spiky. And I've had, to be very careful in line it too, because I have rolled over a few times and cut my arm open because I've been a bit sort of violent with it, but be very still and be careful with it. But it's a great mat to lie on. It's great. So I usually lie on that about 10 minutes before I go to bed at night for about 10 minutes.
You typically do that every single night? You're building that in? No, I vary. I've noticed I get more benefit from varying certain nights. If I do it every night, my body, I think, gets a little bit accustomed to it and get used to it, so I don't get as much benefit from it. So I've noticed for me personally, I'd sort of vary it maybe every second or third night. I jump on that as well. So I usually lie on that, and then I put on a pair of I put on some earplugs, obviously in my ears, to knock out the sound. For me personally, I don't like hearing any sound at all. It's pure silence is best for me. Some people prefer white noises and some sort of noise, so they can have a listen to that as long as your phone's on airplane mode. So you're not getting the EMFs as well when you're sleeping at night. So earplugs in, put my eye mask on because my blinds aren't the darkest. You can either go for blackout curtains and just no need for the eye mask, or if you don't have the money to afford for blackout curtains, an eye mask would be great. Any eye mask is great too. And then mouth taping, that's every single night.
I use the 3M micropore surgical tape on my lips. And I use that every single night. It's without a doubt, because I don't want to, the fact I can focus on breathing through my nose. As you mentioned before, the great book, The Oxygen Advantage. And then I also go around my room and switch off every plug and unplug everything in my room. So there's no electricity, and even unplug it as well, because even when you switch it off, if you leave it plugged in, the electricity still runs through the wires if it's ungrounded. So just unplug it to be safe. It's easy to be done. Put my phone on airplane mode, and then I pretty much just go to bed. And then I focus on breathing, and I'll let go of the day. And that's the biggest one. A lot of people don't want to let go or have their mind racing. So the best thing I've noticed for me personally is just focus on your breathing. And having that attention in your breathing there, eventually you'll find yourself you're out before you know it.
Thanks so much for your wisdom here. We appreciate it, and so much to learn as we keep upgrading to peak performance. Once again, where can we find you, your website, your writings, all the stuff that you're doing out there that we can point people to?
Yeah, you can go to DayneBarkley.com, or you can find me on Instagram at Dayne Barkley. I will be just putting a lot more up there next year as well, and sharing a lot more what I'm working on at the moment, which is a lot to do with the work of holism and body, mind, and spirit. So that's the area I'm sort of focusing on now.
Parting note here, what are you reading right now? What are you learning from? Who are you learning from? What are you reading?
So at the moment, I've got 3 books on the go. I've got Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl.
Oh, amazing. One of my favorite books ever.
Is it? Yeah, it's a fantastic book. It's a nice, small, bite-sized book that most people can get their sort of heads around as well. And it's a fantastic book to sort of get some sense of, I guess, meaning in life. I'm also, so for the health side of things, I'm reading The Fourth Phase of Water by Gerald Pollack.
Great book.
More like a textbook, I guess it is, and a bit more complex than most people are probably used to.
Yeah, that's a tough read for sure, but it's worth it.
I believe so, for sure. And then the other book I'm reading as well, which it's completely changed my life, and it's probably the most impactful book I've ever read. And I've shared it sort of with a few close friends, but it's kind of bizarre. But it's the Conversations with God, and it's crazy to think that I'm not someone to ever think I would read a book with the word God in it. But the fact that I was open to everything now, in a sense that I'm questioning everything in a sense. So that's it's a very good book, and it's very sort of easy to read. And it's even if you don't believe in any sort of spiritual world, it's a great book to sort of open your eyes to sort of different views.
Awesome. Dayne Barkley, we thank you so much. We'll be watching you from afar. I hope everybody listening to this tunes into your Instagram account, because like I said in part 1, it's awesome, and wish you continued success with everything that you're doing. Thanks so much for coming on, buddy.
No, thanks. I really appreciate that. I appreciate all the support, and I love everything you've been doing as well. The great podcasts you've been going on. I've listened to them a lot, and I've recommended to people as well. So definitely jump on board the podcast and subscribe. I think it's fantastic what you're doing.
If you'd like to connect directly with me, the best way to do that is to shoot an email to my team at info@success101podcast.com, or you can catch me in the world of social media on the Success 101 Podcast Facebook community page, or on Instagram under the name @Success101 Podcast. I'll catch you guys on the next awesome episode. Until then.